everyone. My name is Rich Longo, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Today's presentation is Enterprise Service Management, presented by Chuck Spencer. Chuck started with Flycast Partners last year to help build and expand our process improvement offerings for existing and future business partners. As our new Enterprise Service Practice lead, he came to us with a very accomplished background that includes Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and ITIL V3 Expert with multiple certifications including ISO 20000 Manager and Consultant, COBIT 5, PMP, Agile Scrum Master, and Change Management Practitioner. Chuck has well over 25 years of experience in improving and implementing service management processes to drive quality, efficiency, and customer satisfaction. He is an innovative and results-oriented senior technology leader with progressive experience in all phases of service management, project and process management, enterprise, technical support, organizational leadership, and strategic development. Chuck is a strong hands-on professional with a reputation for delivering world-class systems and services on time within budget. He's led enterprise-level process improvement initiatives, quality initiatives, and tool adoption programs in various industries, including energy, oil, gas, healthcare, manufacturing, technology, consulting, retail, and nonprofit. And that's a mouthful. And before we get started, Chuck, let me introduce our organization, Flycast Partners. Flycast is here to deliver a seriously amazing IT experience. Founded and staffed by personnel that have many years of experience in IT space, we took the best ideas from these collective experiences and added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training in ITSM, ITAM, and workload automation spaces using ITIL best practices. Our professional services can easily scale up or down in order to meet the IT needs of any customer, regardless of size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to reinforce your company's long-term IT success. Our ongoing administration support service offerings will enable your organization to focus on your normal day-to-day operations, saving you both time and money. Excuse me, please visit us on the web at www.flycastpartners.com or simply pick up the phone and call us at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. This is just one of our many webinars that we offer here at Flycast Partners, and we encourage you to utilize our website for researching industry white papers, training that is available from ITIL to IT tools of various types, professional services that we offer, and Flycast Partners training. And without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to you, Chuck. I see your screen. Fantastic. It looks great.
All right. Well, great. Can everyone hear me all right?
We hear you fine as well, sir.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for taking some time out of your schedule today for this introduction to Enterprise Service Management. I know you're all very busy, and we'll try to make the best use of your time that we possibly can. But before we jump into this, I want to take just a few minutes and make sure we're all on the same page as to what constitutes a service, and then talk a little bit about what makes an enterprise service. ITIL defines service as a means of delivering value to customers by facilitating outcomes that those customers want to achieve without that customer having to take on the ownership of specific costs and risk. And of course, when we're talking about customers here, those can be internal customers to your organization. That's typically the case with a lot of IT services a lot of you providing, or they can be customers that are external to your organization as well. The key in both cases is that as the service provider, you're assuming all of the risk and the cost associated with the delivery and support of the service, and that's a value in itself. But on top of that, you're trying to add value in the way that you provide those services that stands you apart from other service providers. And while doing all of that at maintaining a reasonable cost for the service provided. And now notice I didn't say it was a lower cost. The value of the service, as we all know, is determined not just by the cost, but by the quality of the service as seen by the customer compared to the cost of the service that they're actually receiving. All of these services need to have repeatable processes for the definition, the design, the development, delivery, and support of those services. And all processes really need the same things. They need to have controls in the form of policies which define what has to be done, when it has to be done, how it has to be done, and who's accountable for doing it. And those policies require governance to ensure that they're being followed, and if the service is subject to regulatory compliance, often to prove that they are being followed, that we're in fact doing the things that we say that we're doing. And this means that there need to be well-defined roles and responsibilities for both the execution of processes and the governance of those processes. And again, these are the processes that are enabling those services. And these roles have to be well documented. They have to be understood by the process owners, by the process managers, the process participants, all of the stakeholders that are involved in this process in any way. And then you also need to have metrics that report key performance indicators and quality indicators to ensure that the performance and quality are being consistently monitored, that it's being reported, and it's baseline so that you can do continual service improvement and ensure that the service enabling processes are remaining constantly efficient, effective, and cost effective. And these performance indicators need to tie back to critical business functions to ensure that you're measuring process performance in a way that it's aligned with business performance so that you can make a distinct correlation between those two and know that if your processes are performing well, then of course your business is performing well. So what then is an enterprise service?
Before we move on, Chuck, you have a box that's covering up your screen a little bit there. Is there any way you can move that?
I sure can. Just a moment. Let me see.
I appreciate that. Thank you. It's kind of, there we go. Much better.
Sorry about that. I was watching a ball game in another window. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's fine.
So what are considered enterprise services? Well, certainly things like the IT services your organization typically provides to both employees and in many cases external customers. But also things like the internal services that you need to simply run your business. Things like HR, like payroll, like facilities, physical plant security, food services, any services that you need to provide to employees for them to be able to deliver products or service to your customers. And then enterprise services extend also to those business services that you're providing to your external customers. For example, you might be a college or a school that's providing online registration to classes or online book orders, or a doctor's office that's providing an online appointment service. All of these are examples of enterprise services. And while I'm talking about these in the context of online services, you know, not all enterprise services use technology to request or deliver the service, but the concepts that we're going to talk about today can still help you support and manage those services. So now that we have a common understanding of enterprise service management, or enterprise services rather, let's look at enterprise service management and talk about where that starts. If you do a Google search for service management, you'll find that there are a number of different definitions for service management. Everything from a software package to enterprise, infrastructure monitoring, to a roadmap for tool implementation. All of those things might have been correct for the time and the context for which they're written, but they don't meet the currently widely accepted definition of service management as we're going to talk about it today. So what then really is service management? Well, ITIL defines service management as a set of specialized organizational capabilities for providing value to customers in the form of services, and that's right out of ITIL V3 books. And it goes further to say that these capabilities take the form of functions and processes for managing services over a life cycle with specialization in strategy, design, transition, operation, and continual improvement. And that the act of transforming services into valuable services is really the core of service management itself. So it's essential to understand that service management is not a process, it's not a function, it's not a system. It's the organizational capability to perform all of those in a way that delivers your services. So then what's the difference between IT service management and enterprise service management? Well, the definition we just discussed never mentioned IT, although as I was reading it, most of you mentally probably plugged IT into that, and as most people, when they read it, plug IT into it as well. But it can be applied to any service, and it can be applied to enterprise service management. And when we say enterprise service management, again, that includes both IT and non-IT business services. All of the types of services we mentioned earlier in the discussion of what is an enterprise service really fall into this. I know you all heard the adage, run IT like a business. But what we're really saying now is run the business like IT. And that's scary to some people, but it really means extending all of the best practices of IT in the form of the functions, the processes, the best practices that make up this service lifecycle and applying that to business services. And while IT may often be criticized for the performance of the infrastructure or some of the outages that we have with the products we have, IT is rarely criticized for having well-run best practice processes. And so what we're really trying to do here is take those same things and extend those to business services and not just the IT services. So it really becomes a question of not why, but why not do this? Both business and IT processes need to be repeatable. Both need to be measurable, both need to be controlled, and they have to be scalable to meet the needs of an ever-changing business environment as your business grows, as you take on new functionality, as you do mergers, any of those kinds of things. And as younger, more tech-savvy customers enter the business community, they're already used to ordering products and services online and taking advantage of technology to do their day-to-day activities. So asking them to use technology and follow a process to request a non-IT service is really more the norm for them than asking them to fill out a paper or call someone or manage it some other way outside of the use of the technology. And all of this speaks to service management, which ITEL has a proven track record of being able to manage well. So what does ITEL bring to the enterprise service management table? Well, think back to our earlier discussion on the key elements of the service enabling processes, beginning with the ability, again, to be repeatable, to have well-documented policies, to have governance, to have roles and responsibilities, and to be surrounded by a continual and service improvement effort. ITEL offers exactly that in a complete service life cycle that addresses all of these key needs that can be applied to business services just as they can to IT services. It starts with developing a strategy to determining which services should be offered, the strategy for delivering those services, and as an example, determining if a service would be provided using an in-house resource or from a strategic partner or a hybrid, as more often is becoming the case these days. I think one of the concepts you're beginning to hear more and more about is something called SIAM, or Service Integration and Management. And while we're not really going to get into a discussion on SIAM in this session, we may have another webinar for that later. Part of this concept is determining your strategy for managing services that are really being delivered by multiple service providers, perhaps in a chain of different service providers, and in some cases, even having some of those providers managed for you by another service provider. And again, all of that is part of your service strategy that you need to develop, not just around the IT services, but also around your business services and all of the enterprise services that you have. Now, ITEL also offers best practices for the design of those services, including things like the development of design packages that include all the complete requirements, making sure they're documented, making sure you have plans, not only for the transition of the service, but the process changes required to ensure ongoing operations of that service. So as part of this design, you're looking at your processes, making sure they'll fit, making sure that they have the right activities in them to support your services once that service is really delivered and it's in operation. And this area also addresses things like service availability, service capacity, all of which you need to do, whether it's a business service or an IT service. You have to look at the availability of that service, the capacity that the service can handle, and all of those things have to be designed into your service, again, regardless of whether this is an IT service or a business service. And then, of course, ITEL defines processes for the transition and ongoing operation of those services themselves. Processes like change and release management, service asset configuration management. When we talk about assets for a business service, again, we're not talking necessarily about IT assets, but any of the assets that you might need to use to actually deliver that service, managing those and managing the configuration of those. And of course, things like incident, event problem management, service request fulfillment, all of those. And all of those are contained in 26 best practice processes, all of which have very well-defined roles and responsibilities. And again, most importantly, all of those have a well-defined process and approach around them for continually improving those services, making sure that you continue to meet the needs of your customers in the most efficient, effective, and cost-effective manner. And again, notice that when you look at any of these processes that are spelled out in any of the ITIL books or any of the charts that you see in ITIL, such as this one, none of those have the word IT in front of them. Any of these can be performed and should be performed for business services, and they can provide the same benefit and value that they bring to an IT service today. Here's an example using a function from an ITIL, a service desk, and applying it to an internal business service like facilities or an internal service like banking. And as you can see in all three examples, I can apply this function service desk to any of these service offerings and allow it to be the single point of contact for any issues regarding that particular service. And while the customer may be asking for different things in each case, the processes are still basically the same. In this case, incident management, service request fulfillment, change management, knowledge management. So for example, in an IT service where I might have a customer that's calling and saying, my account's locked, can you reset my password? In facilities, I might have someone saying, my desk is locked, I can't get in, can someone bring me a key? Or in a banking service, I might have someone saying, my ATM card is bent, can I get a new one? Well, all of those are things that would be handled by a service fulfillment or a service request process. And again, that same process can apply across the board and be modified and tailored to meet that particular business service. I might have things where a customer's calling an IT help desk saying, my keyboard's broken or my mouse is broken or something like that. In facilities, they might be saying, my chair's broken, I need somebody to fix it, or I need to get a new one. And in banking, they might be saying, you know, I deposited some money, but it's not showing up in my account. Again, all of those are examples of really an incident process where you have a service that's suffering a disruption, they're not getting the service they provided, they need someone to address it. So again, I can apply incident manage to that, I can tailor that process to meet the business service as well as the IT service. You have things like the customer asking for access to an application, or that they need a parking permit, or access to the garage, or they need to get a new checking account. All of those, again, are things that you can handle with a service request, or in some organizations, you might choose to do that with a change. But again, the process, the basic process, is still the same process and has many of the same still process activities and needs and governance that you would have regardless of the service that's being supported underneath it. And you can take this as far down the line as you want, and every time that you do this, of course, it's going to be some type of a process that exists within ITIL. I can almost guarantee you for the most part that you can apply that to those. Some, again, maybe things where knowledge articles, another one is a good example here where I could ask for instructions on how to set up my mobile phone, or I could ask for instructions on how to turn on TV in the break room, or how do I print out my statements. And again, those could be things that the service desk could help them with, and you could have a response to that. But there also are areas where you could look at creating knowledge articles that you can service on a portal or somewhere where the customers can find them and look at them and really help themselves. So that's just some examples of how you can take those basic processes and apply them again to really any service that you're offering, whether that's IT or non-IT related. I'll give you another real-world example. A retail store operations team was getting over 1,000 emails a day for store operational issues. Now, these are non-IT issues. Each of those were being sent by emails to different teams, to different people. Sometimes if the store didn't know who to send them to, they would send them to a lot of people. And so as a result, there was really no ownership. Nobody knew who owned which tickets, who was really working on them. There was no accountability. Stores didn't really know exactly who was going to address this for them. As a result, there was a lot of duplication of efforts. You might have multiple people working on the same issue, often contacting the store and asking them about it and just creating a lot of confusion in the store's mind as to what was going on. There was no automation of responses or workflow, so when they sent the email in, they didn't really know if somebody was looking at it or not until it was resolved, or maybe they call back in again. There's no reporting because, of course, on emails sent like this, there's no real way to look at how many you've gotten, what type they are, what category they are, how many you resolved, how quick you resolve them, nothing like that. And so there was no management view of any trends or hotspots. I actually had one senior level manager tell me that he was going through and reading hundreds of emails a day that were in many of these email boxes just to try to spot some hot spots or some trends, so that he would know that if a particular event occurred, that was causing a problem in a store and he could go address that event. Or if a particular product was having a problem, he would know that and he could go address that and bring the right people to solve that problem. So you can see the way that they were doing it was just creating a lot of issues within itself, and the solution really was just to implement a very basic incident management process. Use the ITSM tool that they already had, leverage that investment that they already made in that tool, and use that tool to create tickets to email monitoring. And what occurred when we did that was you had some immediate ownership and accountability of those issues. Instead of just an email floating out there, you now had an issue or an incident that was assigned to a particular group. That group was accountable for it. They had to respond to it. We could establish SLAs against it, that sort of thing. We could give them SLAs for response time. We could track that and measure it. We could report metrics on the number of incidents we were having. We could categorize those and classify them by which stores were having those, which regions were having those, which departments were having those issues. We could categorize to the type of issue they were having. So it gave us a lot more metrics that we could then really pinpoint the hot spots and really start to identify where the problems really were and make sure that we had the right resources on there to address those problems. And then finally, we were able to produce management dashboards to highlight trending, resolution times, hotspots, all of that sort of thing, so that that manager I was talking about, who before was looking and reading through all these emails, could now go to a dashboard and see a trending chart, for example, that showed there was a spike in issues for this particular category. And that would tell him that those were the things he needed to go look at and focus on versus reading through hundreds of emails. Or it could tell him that a particular region was having an issue or a particular store was having an issue. So as you can see, it gave them a much, much better tool to be able to manage their environment and manage their business from. So that's just one real world example of how to take the processes and the tools that are originally thought of to be just for IT and use those for a non-business IT use that really provides some real value. So who's adopting ITIL principles for business service management? Well, HDI and ITSM USA released a paper in October of 2014 that showed that 51% of the organizations they surveyed had adopted or were currently planning to adopt ITIL practices for non-IT services. Now, that's a fairly significant number, and I have to believe that by now, a year later, that number has increased even more. I can tell you that a recent ITSM tool user conference that I went to, there were a large number of presentations at that conference focused around the use of that particular ITSM product for non-IT services. And I'm willing to bet that at other ITSM tool conferences, people are talking about the same things and they're seeing the same kind of presentations. And more IT service management tool vendors focus on the fact that their tool can be used as a platform for more than just IT, that it can handle much more than that. And again, it does that using the same processes and the same terminology and a lot of the same things that they were doing before with IT. As I said, a lot of organizations are already starting to implement service management for non-IT services. But when you look at those and when you go to some of these presentations that I'm talking about, a lot of them are focusing only on the tool and on some of the basic operational processes and functions behind ITIL. For example, they might be standing up a service portal and putting their business services on that service portal. They might be implementing a service desk specific to that set of business services, or moving those even to be answered by the same service desk that's doing IT stuff. And they're putting in place some basic operational procedures like service request fulfillment, incident management. And quite honestly, a lot of organizations, to some extent, that's the extent of their ITSM processes. They really go no farther than that. And that's a shame, because the real value in all of this comes from introducing that entire service lifecycle approach and adapting those processes to meet not only your IT services, but your business services, and addressing your enterprise services as a whole. All of the processes that are used to enable IT services can and should be adapted for our business service. And every stage of the life cycle is applicable, beginning with the development of a service strategy that defines the perspective, the position, the plans, and patterns of your business that help you determine your service strategy and start to help you define the services that you want to offer as part of your service portfolio. And then demand and availability and capacity and service continuity. As I mentioned before, all of these have to be designed into your services and managed according to some established plans. And the relationships with business suppliers need to be developed and maintained. And just as in the case of IT services, all of these process-enabling business services need to have, as I've said over and over again because I can't stress it enough, well-documented policies, they have to have governance, they have to have clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and then key performance indicators and quality indicators so that they can be proactively used to manage the operation of those services and help be predictive of business success and business service. All of those things happen with the service design stage of the life cycle through the processes that are defined in that stage. And then service transition, as is defined in ITEL, ensures that those services are implemented, that they're modified, that they're retired when the time comes in a way that meets the expectations of the business as documented in that service strategy and the service design stages of the life cycle. Service assets, and again, those can be IT assets, those can be business assets, need to be managed through their entire life cycle. Any changes to those assets should follow a change management process, and it's critical that as services are validated and tested, knowledge is collected and managed to be available as needed in operations. Many times as we're designing these services, as we're transitioning services in, we're finding things out about these services and things that might happen, and perhaps sometimes even finding some known errors that we're willing to, because we need to get the service out to our customers, willing to accept for a while, but we need to make sure that if we do, those are well documented, that we found workarounds for them, that those are published and known, and we pass that knowledge on to operations. And in some cases, again, we might even create knowledge articles that customers can see, so that if they run across that particular issue, they can resolve it themselves or help themselves anyway. And then most importantly, a continual service improvement process needs to be in place so that as those business needs change or the services fail to meet the needs of the business, there are means to quickly identify and implement service improvements for that. So as I said earlier, the real value lies beyond just the implementation of a service desk, beyond the implementation of the service portal, and beyond just the use of the tool to handle some of the common operational processes, and really lies in trying to take this entire service life cycle and all these processes and apply them to your business services and your non-IT services, as well as just your IT services. So where do you begin with doing all of this? Well, I think you start on focusing on your organizational capabilities around people, process, and technology, and how you use these capabilities to design, deliver, and support your enterprise services. For example, do you have the right skills and experience to deliver and support the business services you provide? Do your people have those right skills and experience? If not, what training do you need to provide to improve their skills and their experience areas? Is it training in the tool? Is it training in the processes? Is it just some general knowledge about ITEL itself? If you're going to use that as kind of your framework for these services, do they have access to the knowledge they need? And if the answer to any of these questions is no, then you sometimes may want to look to see if you can augment their skills, their experience, their knowledge by use of a third party or a partner to actually help you with doing that. And that, again, is all part of looking at your capabilities around people. Next are the processes themselves that you use to enable services. You want to make sure that they're efficient, that they're effective. Efficiency is a measurement that is really from an internal perspective of, you know, how much is it costing me to do this service? Am I wasting efforts on it? Am I wasting resources on it? Where effectiveness is really a measurement of how well your customers are being served by that service, and are they getting what they need, and are they getting it in the right time frames, and is it meeting their needs? And of course, you also want to look at your processes from a quality perspective to make sure that they're continually producing their outputs in a quality manner that really meets the overall needs of that customer in a way that they need to have those in place. And then you have to look at, do you have sufficient governance again in place to ensure that the processes are being followed, that they're compliant with your internal policies, and compliant with any external regulatory requirements that you might have. This is, again, looking at things like SOX, like PCI, all of those things, all of these processes, and your ability to do these processes have a direct ability on those controls and making sure that you're able to meet those controls. And the best design and thought-out process won't help you a bit if they're not consistently being followed and you don't have governance to help ensure that that's the case and that things are really moving they want to do. And then finally, what about the technology that you're using to deliver and manage these services and service components? Are they fit for purpose? And more importantly, are they fit for use? Do they really have the warranty that you need to make them fit for your use? Do they have things like availability, capacity, speed of delivery? Do they have all of those things that are really letting you use that technology in the best way? And then also, is there an opportunity to use that technology to better automate the delivery of the services you provide and deliver them with more consistency and at a lower cost? Because while we said that lower cost isn't necessarily what the customer looks at, that is one of our goals, is to make sure that we keep things as low cost as we can while maintaining that quality. So when you look at these capabilities, there's a sweet spot that's right in the middle here, where all of these come together, where your people, your process, and your technology really are a well-suited blend. And the goal of what we're trying to accomplish with enterprise service management is to grow that or enlarge that area of effectiveness to make sure that you're getting the most out of your people, the most out of your processes, and the most out of your technology for both non-IT and IT services. So again, for all of your enterprise management services. And that really should be the goal for your organization, is to expand that area to make sure that you're getting the most out of those three areas. We've talked a lot about ITIL as we've gone through this, but ITIL isn't the only framework that you want to look at in terms of guidance for enterprise service management. While ITIL offers best practices on managing services, Lean Six Sigma, for example, is a recognized framework for measuring quality and improving process performance, making sure that you don't have a lot of waste in your process, making sure that there aren't a lot of non-value activities that are really slowing down your process and really not providing any real value to your customers. And again, Lean Six Sigma is very helpful in helping you both measure and determine those things and then come up with improvements. And a lot of times those improvements will tie back to implementing best practices that are in ITIL. So as always, there's a integration between the two of those. And then you also have standards like ISO 20000 or ISO 15504 or ISO 27701, all of the standards that are out there that offer guidance on specific areas that need to be addressed and help you determine the capability that you have for service management according to a set of defined standards. If we're just looking at ITIL, again, ITIL is best practices, and those are things we can do and should do. But standards tell us what we have to do to meet that standard and to really make sure that we're implementing ITIL and we're implementing things in the best possible way. And then finally, there are a number of control frameworks, as I mentioned before, that need to be taken into consideration when you're looking at your services to make sure that you meet any regulatory requirements. And all of these are the starting points really then for improving the capability of your organization so that your organization has the capabilities to transform services and resources, or excuse me, to transform your resources into services for your customers. Now, Flycast, our ITSM service is targeted at helping you do just that. It's targeted at helping you improve your organization's capability in this area. We offer planning workshops, we offer process maturity assessments, we offer process design where we can sit with you and really work through and design the best process for you, again, whether that's an IT or a non-IT service. And then we can give you some guidance around how to really implement continual service improvement and make sure that, as the name implies, you're continually looking at those services as you provide them and making sure that the best they can possibly be. So please contact us if you need to learn more about that and how we can help you improve your service management capabilities. And that really is what we're going to talk about today. Again, this was kind of just an introduction into enterprise service management to kind of get you thinking about it a little bit, get you thinking about where you might want to go with your organization. And I think we have time here left for questions if there are questions from anyone in the audience out there.
And if you have any questions, go ahead and type your questions in our question and answer section of the box. And we'll go ahead and get some answers from Chuck. Chuck brings a lot to the table here, so this is a great time. Take advantage of them while you have them. And Chuck, what can you tell us about some of the different enterprise service management offerings that Flycast Partners is expanding into here in the next couple months?
Well, as I mentioned, the planning workshops are a really good opportunity for you to take a look at the vision and mission that you have within your organization and make sure that your service strategy matches up to that vision and that the processes and services that you have are a good match to that. And if you haven't really developed that vision statement yet, or haven't developed your mission and your objectives, we can certainly sit with you and help you develop that as well to make sure that that's a good match to the business vision that your organization might have. And so we're helping you develop that. And then we can sit down as part of that and take a look at, do just a high level kind of analysis of where you think you are today against that vision and goals, and what areas do you think you need improvement on, and just at kind of a high level start to set down a game plan of what you might need to tackle next. We can talk when you in those sessions about what metrics you're currently collecting, and if those are the right metrics to really measure your progress towards that vision. And then we can sit down with you and help you again plan out kind of a roadmap of what the next steps might be to move you closer to that vision and get things going, and then work with you to actually implement those improvements that you have in place, whether those are improvements to your process, whether they're an improvement to your tool, whether it's looking for a new tool, whatever those kinds of things might be. So that really is a good starting point for where you might want to begin with looking at enterprise service management, is just to do some planning workshop. The other things that we can do, as I mentioned, we can come in and do assessments of your particular processes that you do have in place, and do what we call a maturity assessment, which is really looking not necessarily as much as do the processes match ITIL in the best way, but looking a little bit at that, but also looking at just how well does your organization understand the processes, how well do they adhere to them, how well are they documented, because again, if people aren't following the processes that you have, you're not going to get where you want to go, and you're not going to get the quality output that you're looking to get from that. And so we can do some assessments around that in a variety of different ways and help you do either a self-assessment, or we can come in and do what we call a 360-degree assessment, which really takes us a lot further into the assessment and looks at it from a number of different angles and does a lot of in-depth interviews with your team and with stakeholders to really determine where you are. And then I mentioned process design. We can come in and help you design your processes if that needs to occur, or you just need to take a look at your processes and improve them. We can help you document what your currently processes are. We can help you make sure you have the metrics in place to benchmark those processes and then start to develop some improvements from. And the capability that we think we bring that's kind of unique to this area is that we can offer you, we've built templates out already for all 26 processes. So we have a good starting point. If you don't really have a demand management process or a problem management process or a service asset and configuration management process, we're not starting from scratch. And we're not just starting by, coming to a whiteboard and starting to map it out. We have ITIL best practice process templates that will start to guide you in the right direction, and then we can tailor and tune those to your specific organization. And then, of course, as Rich mentioned in the opening course, we also offer training and education. We can come in and help your organization learn more about ITIL. We can do ITIL foundation classes. There's a new class coming up for ITIL practitioner that I'm particularly excited about because it bridges the gap between ITIL foundation and some of the more advanced, intermediate, and expert courses that take a considerable amount of time and probably are more than a lot of people want to go through, and they cost quite a bit of money. These practitioner courses are targeted, and this certification is targeted directly at individuals who just need to know more about how to apply what they learned in foundation to their daily business and their daily practice. So we can offer training around those areas as well. So again, quite a number of areas that from the ESM service perspective, we can help you with in improving your organizational capabilities around enterprise service management.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that with us, Chuck. And Chuck, it doesn't look like we have any direct questions, but I can tell you from the sign-ups of the folks we have today, we had an overwhelming interest in process and design. That seemed to be what a lot of people were interested in. So I think there's probably going to be some further discussion on that. If there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy day. I know how busy it can be, for spending time with us on this very important subject, a subject subject that can eventually lead to better operations for you and your organization and hopefully saving you money in the long run. So with that being said, thanks again, Chuck. Great presentation. And I'm going to wish everyone a great day.
Great day, and thank you to everyone.